Now, South Africans will be spending more time in the dark with Eskom announcing stage 6 of load shedding. The power utility has previously indicated that a minimum of stage 4 power cuts will be implemented over the weekend. Now, the tripping of a generating unit at Kusile and Creel power stations is set to be behind the move to stage 6 load shedding. Eskom is expected to hold a media briefing this morning at 10 o'clock to provide the outlook for the load shedding stages for the week ahead. For more on the country's energy crisis, we're joined by energy expert David Lipschitz. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, David. And I mean, if you look through social media this morning alone after that announcement was made by Eskom, many people are calling for the head of the current CEO, Andre de Ruyter. And then one wonders, will that actually make a difference? Firing the CEO is not necessarily going to guarantee that we have energy.
Yes, I would agree with that, Rofhiwa. I think that we've had so many CEOs that strategies haven't really been given time to be implemented. I also think that, we've spoken about this before, that Medupi and Kusile power stations require the best quality coal. We're putting the worst quality coal into them. That's why they keep breaking. So there's so many things that we should be doing. We need to start off with looking at the policy of the energy policy of 1998 and the renewable energy policy of 2003 and implementing those. The IRP 2010-2013 update, that needs to be implemented. The National Planning Commission report of 2010 for the strategy in 2030, that needs to be implemented. There's so many things that need to be done. We have all the paperwork already, but we have so much greenwashing, which is when the government says one thing and then does another thing. And then the other thing is, yesterday I was watching an interview and somebody said, Eskom employee said, we started our build late. That's true. We did start Medupi and Kusile late, maybe 5 years late. But Medupi should have been complete in 2015 and Kusile should have been complete in 2018. Both are not complete. Both are running very inefficiently. And then we're meant to have something called Coal 3, another 5 gigawatt power station that should be on stream by now. I think that, when you look at Eskom, every time they get a price increase, they don't do their work. Their work is to produce electricity. Their work is to produce more and more electricity. And from 1923 until 1973, they did that, and the price came down every year as electricity went up. Then from 1973 to 1994, the price of electricity went up in real terms, but we had more and more electricity. And then for the last 25 years-ish, especially since 2008, we've had so many price increases. And, there's two ways to make more money in a business. One is increase your price. The other way is to make more of your product. And if you keep increasing your price, you keep chasing your clients away. So, there's this whole, what's the right word? Integration of things we need. Then you have people saying, renewable energy doesn't work. So renewable energy works in a particular kind of way. Coal works in a particular kind of way. Gas works in a particular way. We need an integrated grid with all of these things to do the energy transition. And lastly, the energy transition has been happening since 1850. It's not a new thing. When the Industrial Revolution started, it was a massive move to coal. Then in the early 20th century, it was a massive move to oil. And we didn't use less coal. And then when we moved from oil to other things, we didn't use less oil. So we have this massive possibility that arises at the moment, and we need to grab it and make it happen. And it needs everybody to work together. Government must work with business, must work with active citizens, and this three-part system is very well explained in the National Planning Commission report of 2010.
David, let's speak about the latest stage, which is stage 6. You indicated in a note earlier on that stage 6 was actually implemented a few months ago, and this stage could actually perhaps be a little bit more worse than what Eskom is actually communicating. Based on your analysis, where would you say that we are in terms of the actual stage of power cuts in the country?
Well, Eskom should have between 50 and 80 gigawatts on the grid by now. So you could say that even before we have, Eskom starts load shedding when they lose 1 gigawatt to 28 gigawatts. But if Eskom had 60 gigawatts on the grid, then you could say that we're already at stage 32 before we start load shedding. And therefore, Eskom is load shedding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's costing, in my calculation, before we have load shedding, the fact that Medupi and Kusile and Ngule and other power stations are not operating properly, it's costing the economy about 10 billion rand a day. So, you know, the Eskom are load shedding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, before we even get to load shedding for the public, there's load shedding of smelters, and there's load shedding of big business, and there's load shedding in shopping centers. You walk into a shopping center when there's no load shedding, and you discover that sorry, I'm being distracted by your video, but when you walk into a shopping center and you discover that some of the lifts aren't working, some of the escalators aren't working, some of the air conditioning feels warm. It's because Eskom are actually supplying that shopping center with less electricity during that time. That's even before load shedding. So you actually feel it happening, you know, in the wider community and the wider grid. So Eskom are load shedding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even before load shedding. And then by the time load shedding happens, they're running, you know, these very expensive turbines, which are meant to be using gas. They're actually using diesel, which is pushing the diesel price up. I mean, for the first time in South African history, the diesel cost is higher than the petrol cost. So, you know, these are things that we need to look at. We need to try and look at it at a whole, an integrated whole, and then we can solve the problems that we have.
And it's going to be difficult, David, because at the moment, Eskom has now gone to NERSA and asked for an increase in tariffs of about 39%. You know, not only is that unsustainable for us as South African households, but also for Eskom. They cannot rely on a single source of income, which at the moment happens to be those who pay for electricity, including individuals and businesses. And I mean, a 39% increase is absolutely bizarre to ask for from a power utility that isn't even providing electricity.
Correct. And it's worse than that, actually, because that's only the kilowatt-hour price increase. We already have service fees. And, you know, we're paying 250 Rand a month service fee here in Cape Town, and that's before we even buy 1 kilowatt-hour. 5 years ago, that didn't exist. Now, they want to put the 250 Rand up to 900 Rand. That's for single phase. 3-phase, they want to put that service fee up to 4,000 Rand a month before you even buy 1 kilowatt-hour. So what they're doing is they're chasing their clients away. Instead of welcoming their clients and saying, David, can you supply us with electricity at 9 p.m. from your battery bank? And I can say, yes, I can. And if 1 million people did that, we wouldn't have load shedding. So, you know, there's also the government and Eskom are saying that big business have got, you know, they pay half the electricity fee in how much electricity they need to buy. And the rest is kilowatt hour. So, but they get a whole lot of incentives. For example, they get paid to load shed. They get paid to export properly electricity. They get a whole lot of other perks from Eskom. If they reduce their peak demand, they save money on that service fee. So, I mean, if they came to me and said, David, we want to charge you a service fee for consuming electricity, and they did it the same way that they did it for big business, and I needed, say, 10 kilowatts maximum demand, and I reduced my maximum demand to 5 kilowatts, my service fee should be half of what it is for my neighbor who might be using 10 kilowatts. So it's all very well for Eskom to say that, you know, they charge their big customers big service fees, but then their customers get perks. Big customers also get time of use tariffs, which means that, for example, if I had time of use tariffs, I would choose to run my washing machine at 10 p.m. instead of at 10 a.m. So I would move my consumption around to use electricity at off-peak time. If I need to cook, I would do my cooking at off-peak time when I'm paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity instead of 3.50 Rand per kilowatt hour for electricity. So, you know, Eskom are taking pieces of the puzzle, you know, and saying, but this happens there, but they're not giving us the whole picture. And the only way we're going to really succeed in South Africa is for Eskom to come clean and say, David, Rofhiwa, South Africa, this is what we can do. Let's work together to make it happen.
So on that, David, we had Andre de Ruyter speaking a couple of days ago at a conference indicating that gas is probably the solution to deal with the power crisis that we have in the country at the moment. But this is a tune that has been sung for a while. The problem here I see is two things here, David. The fact that we've got environmental groups that stop exploration projects by companies that want to see South Africa's gas potential, but also, do you not think that there's a huge lack of political will here, in that there are interests in the political realm that really work against South Africa expanding its energy provision sources?
You know, look at Europe. Europe integrated their gas system with Russia, and look at how they're paying for that. It's not exactly the same in South Africa, but Europe already has piped gas everywhere. Europe uses gas mainly for heating in winter. So, you know, they're coming up to winter now. It's getting colder, and they've got a huge crisis on their hands. So that Mr. de Ruyter saying that South Africa should move to gas, it's all very well, but we don't have a piped gas infrastructure. You know, Cape Town, the city of Cape Town, in the Victorian days, we had gas lights, and there's gas in Vredehuk and so on, old gas pipes, probably broken by now, but we did have gas 100 years ago in Cape Town. But, you know, people are, the greenies, the environmentalists, myself as an environmentalist, we're against fracking. We're not necessarily against gas extraction. You know, there's a lot of gas in Mozambique. There's a lot of gas off Namibia. You know, there's a lot of that kind of gas available, which could be piped into the cities. But the main thing is that the first thing is Eskom must make Medupi and Kusile work. The starting point for that is to use the cleanest possible coal. We have that coal in South Africa. Unfortunately, we export that coal. And there's a whole bunch of other things that Eskom needs to be doing with Medupi and Kusile and the other power stations. You know, we've seen these videos online of coal trucks arriving and being hijacked, and then bad coal being put into the coal trucks. So there's a whole infrastructure problem going on. A lot of that is caused by mass unemployment. I think we're probably close to 40% unemployment in South Africa. And that's caused for two primary reasons: a shortage of electricity and a shortage of water. Now, if the Western Cape, for example, made its own electricity, I believe we could have electricity abundant and 30% cheaper than it is now. And if we had electricity 30% cheaper than it is now, our water cost would be 70% cheaper than it is now, and abundant from desalination. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that the politicians need to do, the leaders need to do, the big business need to do, and especially big business. You know, big business, the big energy companies, the other companies have lawyers. They get what they want, but for some reason they're not prepared to say, hey, government, we want to make our own electricity. We want to become a utility. We want to generate our own power. We want to supply the grid. We want to supply our staff. We want our staff to supply us. There's this whole integration that needs to happen. I believe it's possible, but I believe that not enough parts of the South African environment are talking to each other. So big business needs to talk to Eskom. Eskom needs to talk to municipalities. Municipalities need to talk to people like me who can supply the grid at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. You know, so but people like me are being pushed away from the grid, and this is something that I really don't want. And I believe that, you know, if Eskom get their big increase next year, they're going to push people away, because people are going to say, if I need to pay 1,000 Rand a month to be connected to the grid, what's the point? I'm not getting paid properly. If I send electricity to the grid at 50 cents a kilowatt hour, it's going directly to my neighbor who's paying 3 Rand 50 a kilowatt hour. The city of Cape Town make 3 Rand a kilowatt hour of that purchase for doing absolutely nothing. It doesn't even hit their transformer. So there's no upkeep, there's no cost in that. It's you know, it's a misnomer.
Yeah, no, David, I mean, earlier on in our conversation, you indicated that Eskom has to come clean about exactly what is happening at that power utility. With that in mind, would you say that this load shedding is somewhat of a deliberate attempt to collapse the utility in its entirety?
I don't think they would. You know, we've had this people saying that every time Eskom will have a price increase, they make the load shedding worse, but they also make their own income worse. You know, they're losing hundreds of millions of rands a day when they're load shedding us. So I don't think that Eskom would purposefully destroy the economy. That would be treason. I do think that the engineers need to be consulted, the scientists need to be consulted, the independent energy experts and citizen scientists like myself need to be consulted. We should all be in a big room virtually these days, working out how to solve the problem. There's a lot of goodwill, but I believe that the goodwill is being chased away. And, we can supply the whole of South Africa just with rooftop energy. We have enough roof space in South Africa to supply all of our demand. PV prices have come down 90% in the last 10 years. Battery prices have come down 95% in the last 10 years. Capabilities have gone up. Things have changed. Yes, we're going to need coal. We're going to need gas. We're going to need oil. We're going to need that for a long time. But we shouldn't be burning all of our coal and all of our oil now. We need it for another 1,000 years. If we run out of coal and oil, I think in 2045, the world starts running out of oil. What's going to happen to our transport system? Why are we burning oil in power stations? If Sasol would work out a better way to convert coal into oil that's cleaner, if they'd spent the last 70 years just focused on that, we would probably be having as clean oil from coal as we have so-called clean coal or clean gas. So there's so much potential goodwill, roof space. I've said that, if I have a big warehouse across the road from me, 200 meters away, they can probably put 2 megawatts on their roof. They may only need 100 kilowatts for their own needs. Now, if they get chased off the grid loses 1.9 megawatts of potential roof space energy. Plus, they've got a huge warehouse. They can store batteries in it. Cape Town's got the old Athlone power station, which has been closed for a decade or more. That power station should be Cape Town's big battery bank, and talk to companies like Tesla and Panasonic and so on that are making massive battery banks. So I think there's a huge opportunity for integration, for speaking to each other, and for the coal people to say, how can we work with the renewable energy people? And the renewable energy people say, how can we work with the gas people so that we can do this transition?
Finally, David, a few days ago, Eskom put out a notice saying that they've initiated a crowdfunding initiative where they're looking for skills to weigh in on what's happening at Eskom. I mean, many read that and thought this is very worrying because it means that at the moment, no one really knows how to find an immediate solution to this problem in terms of the right skills being within the power utility. What would you make of that?
Crowdfunding is when you go to the crowd to get money for investment. This crowdsourcing they're doing happens in different small businesses. It doesn't normally happen in a big business. So maybe they're taking a small business model and applying it. But I think that the missing link is that there are lots of people like me who learned how to make our own electricity, who learned how to deal with our water crisis, who learned how to solve food problems. And we all need to be together in a room. We're all offering our services. We're all saying to Eskom and the government, we want to help. And let us help. And let us all work together. And I wrote a long article a few months ago that says that renewable energy lends itself to the South African environment, with low skills. If you build a coal power station or a nuclear power station or a gas power station, you need massive engineering skills and very high cost people. When you build a renewable energy system, you don't need that. You need matriculants, who can do electrical courses to be able to sign off systems and so on. But you don't need, the government says you need an electrical engineer to sign off a PV system. That's like forcing a doctor to give an injection when the nurse can give an injection. So different people have got different capabilities, and we're forcing the costs to be too high. But by the way that we. Let me just go another tack. Eskom and the government are focused on how much money they can make out of electricity and how many jobs are created with electricity. But it's not about Eskom. It's about 50 million or 60 million people in South Africa who need electricity and want to pay for it at a good price and make the economy work and make the economy grow so that jobs grow. So, you can have, and then because if another 10 million people were employed in the next 5 years because we had abundant electricity, the government would make all the money in taxation rather than in high electricity costs. So at the moment, for the past 20 years, The government has been looking, how much money can we take out of the supply side instead of how much money can we take out of the output side? So, this is a strategic government focus that's in the wrong place, in my opinion. In America, one of the good things is that the price of electricity, the price of fuel, the price of transport are all low. You can even buy your house in America before tax, because America wants to make America work and wants to get money because people are paying tax, corporates are paying tax, and that's where they make their money. So we're being taxed on the very things that make the economy work.
Sure. Energy expert David Lipschitz, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Some very scary insights provided there in terms of Eskom and really what's happening within that power utility and whether it's actually fixable. Still to come.